Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here today. I would like to first start by acknowledging the land that I'm on. I'm currently in Markham, Ontario, and this is the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of New Credit. And I want to give thanks to the ancestors for allowing me to be present here. And in doing that, I also want to give thanks to the ancestors of my direct lineage for allowing me to be present here as well and giving me the power and strength to present for you today. Before I start, I want to say my name in full. Dobijoki Emanuela Nicola Khalifa Brinji. I identify as a product of the continent of Africa, a seed of Nubia, and a child of Beled al-Sudan. So in other terms, I am a South Sudanese geopolitically. I was born in Egypt, and I'm African first. So today we're talking about quality education. And when we talk about quality education, I also want you to think about quality representation in relation to education. And think about that as I go throughout my presentation and try to understand how you could also.
I think there's another couple questions that'll come right at the end.
Oh.
My apologies.
Okay. I heard something. Can you hear me? Okay, I think it's disrupted a little bit. So I really want you to think about quality representation within education. So my education journey did not just begin when I came to Canada in 1997. My education journey actually began in 1994 at 2 years old. So my family, as I mentioned, is originally from Sudan. And when in Sudan, they realized the civil war wasn't going to provide opportunities, of course. So they fled to Egypt. And upon arrival to Egypt, they thought they were seeking freedom. Once they arrived to Egypt and realized that the education system was not accessible for Sudanese communities, they realized they had to do something about it. So my mother, alongside a bunch of other South Sudanese women, went in front of the UNHCR in Cairo, Egypt, and they protested. So my first protest was at 2 years old. And although I didn't know it at the time, I was really starting my journey in seeking quality education for people who look like me, for Black folks and people of African descent. And when I think about my Sudanese experience and when I think about my education experience as a whole, I constantly think about what it means to be holistic and what it means to be indigenous, an indigenous African. And I think of this poem. I am an African woman from Beled al-Sudan, now South Sudan, born in Egypt, raised in Canada, working hard so I could one day make asida, fufu, in the village with no shoes on, wearing a kitenge, and feeling so good to be home. I often think about what home is. To me, it's an imagined homeland. However, I understand the peace and the power in indigeneity and the power in our knowledges that was stripped away from us in every setting that we've been in, from Egypt all the way to here, Canada. So in 1997, we came to Canada seeking for freedom and education. However, once we came to Canada, we were met with contradictions to our freedom, because we realized that we were in a land that was stolen, and a land that was stolen from Indigenous people, and we could relate to that experience. So for me, understanding what my experience is as an African woman in Canada also has to reflect the realities, the fact that I'm a visitor on this land. When I was in elementary school, I realized the system was not built for me because I never had support in the education system. I then went on to high school, and still I didn't have support in even applying for post-secondary education. And in my second year of university, one of my first classes that year, a professor told me, it was like the second day of class, he said, "You're not going to be an A student." And I was confused. I literally called my sister crying. I called some of my mentors crying. I'm like, why would someone say something like this to me? Because I knew in that moment that the color of my skin was representative of what he thought was unworthy, and that he thought that I could not accomplish what I wanted in life. And this was a reality that we needed representation. I never experienced a professor that looked like me that could remind me of my power. And so I had to seek discovery, self-discovery. I had to understand who I was as an Indigenous woman, who I was as an Indigenous African woman, an Indigenous African woman who's trying to understand who she is in the context of the Western world. I felt hurt, I felt pain, I felt rage, and I needed a way to kind of express it. And so I joined the African Student Union and the Black Student Alliance as well. And I became president. So in this picture here, you see me protesting that Black Lives Matter. And the realities of Black people within the education system is that it was not built for us. And so when I think of the picture I showed you before, me in 1994 at the age of 2, protesting. This is me in 2014 protesting on the same journey, seeking quality education with quality representation. And so this self-discovery reminded me that I needed to find my power. And in doing that, I went to South Africa. And I realized that not only was my indigeneity lost, but people that I was working with, indigenous communities that I was working with in South Africa, had also lost part of their experiences due to westernization and colonization. The residue of the apartheid was so prevalent, and I realized that I had to create something. So we created an after-school program for mothers and daughters, where they could pass on traditions to one another, where they could finally have a space to truly talk about the power within them, within their indigeneity, within their Africanness. And so when I think about this contradiction, I think about a poem that I wrote, which was called Contradictions. That one is in their home, but doesn't really realize that it's their home. One is in their home, but their knowledges have been stripped away from them. This poem is called Contradictions. What is this world we live in? Nothing seems to make any sense. They say the world was created by Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. But Eve gave birth to both Adam and Steve, and the respect that she's given is being raped and beat. And they say Africa is the motherland, but from my understanding, that's where slavery began, and now you're trying to erase my memories and change me into a white man? It's like war overcomes love, and they start questioning what happened to the God above. Kanye West once said he was an abomination to Obama's nation. It has come to the point that when I'm mad, I will bomb your nation, like Syria, like Libya, like North Korea and South Korea, like the New Sudan and South Sudan. I'm from South Sudan. They call it the dirty South. But the Arabs came into our country. They said that we were dirty, so they kicked us to the South. You tried stripping me away from my identity. You oppressed, you killed, and you hated me with no doubt. Now I understand what the natives complain about. African soil has turned into turmoil. Sudan refreshing war because of the term oil. My brothers and sisters not shaking each other's wrists. Victims of struggled war now in the orphanage. Government oppressing their people. Land, mass, and grass used to bury people. Water that we quench and thirst for is used to drown people. What happened to the love that protected us so lethal? A bullet shot of love, now you are my equal. Allah, Kareem, protect us from this regime. Jesus Christ, guide me, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, draw near. See, it's not an eye for an eye, but it is eye and eye, like Haile Selassie, Jah blessed is Rastafari. Now some Jews, they write G-D, not G-O-D, because they understand the strength when the Lord said, only fear me. Love your brothers and sisters, they are not your enemy. Mama Africa's children, join hands in unity. So when I think about power, I think about everything in me internally. I think about my indigeneity. I think about my Africanness. And I question whether the education system here in Canada and education systems globally has acknowledged the relationship between African people and their indigenous knowledges. So is it really quality education? Nelson Mandela once said, education is the most powerful weapon which we can use to change the world. And although I agree with his statement, I acknowledge that education is the most powerful weapon we can use to misguide, mislead, and misinform the world. And this is because the education system has misguided, misled, and misinformed African students and students of African descent, Black students, that their knowledges are not significant, that their indigeneity is not powerful, that their ways of knowing, being, and doing is not essential. So, when I think of quality representation, I realized that the only time I really had quality representation within my education system is when I went and completed my master's. And thanks to my ancestors, thanks to my friends, families, and mentors, I actually made it to this point and survived the public school system. However, it wasn't until this point where I saw representation, a woman who looked like me, my supervisor. Dr. Erica Nina Gadwejin, who is Taino and Indigenous and Black, who reminded me of the importance of my presence in spaces, the importance of taking up space, and the importance of someone who looks like me, the representation within academia and within the school system. So, what is quality representation? The photo on the left is a beautiful woman who completed her Master's of Arts in Education, Critical Policy, Equity, and Leadership Studies at the University of Western Ontario, a prestigious university. A woman who completed institutional education. The one on the right is an African woman, an Indigenous African woman from Brinji, Wau, Western Bahagazal, South Sudan, a Balanda woman who recognizes her knowledge, who recognizes her indigeneity as part of who she is, who recognizes the importance of holistic work and responsibility, collective work and responsibility. So I've been able to reconcile these two. And although one is considered institutional and one is considered holistic, I reconcile them because they're both a form of survival. One for the capitalist system and one for my heart and spirit. So, storytelling is education. Storytelling is healing. I have a service called Dobijoki Personal Development where I use Indigenous African-centered ways of knowing, being, and doing to support people in owning their power story, in owning their stories and recognizing who they are prior, post-colonialism. So, my call to action, create spaces for Black people, students, and communities. Recognize that storytelling is knowledge. Acknowledge that quality education sits strongly within representation. Quality representation is necessary for students of African descent. And today I didn't provide you with any statistics. I didn't provide you with any resources or sources to review. I provide you with my story and my voice. And I want you to acknowledge that my voice is valid and the voices of Black students are valid as well. I also want you to look at the bottom and see, it says Justice for AHMAUD ARBERY. This is a young Black man who was recently shot across the border in the United States for being Black, jogging in his neighborhood, for his existence. Please recognize the importance of our stories. Please recognize the importance of us being in spaces. Please recognize the validity of our indigeneity and our power. Thank you.